Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Sunandini and I'm an entrepreneur and have been associated with Inside IIM as a video producer since 2022. The agenda of this webinar is to create awareness about doing an MBA at top B schools in the world and how many different paths you can choose to reach the top. Today, we are privileged to have Vikas Bardia, who is not only a CFA, but also an Oxford University alumni with a master's degree in financial economics. He has also received scholarship worth 20,000 euros, which is around 16 lakhs from 5 different organizations, and was working in Smallcase up until 2020. Joining us as our guest speaker. He will enlighten us about his journey, struggles, and achievements, shedding a spotlight on his transitions from working at Goldman Sachs and Disha company in India to Willis Tower Watson in UK and coming back to India as the head business growth in Smallcase. So Vikas, let's begin this. You
Hi,
have
hi
all
everyone.
okay, yeah, please do continue.
No, I just hello everyone and thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
Yeah, please
So,
continue.
so you have been amidst economics and finance throughout your career up until the last job, I guess, in business growth. But before we dig into that, I want to understand what kind of a kid you were when you were awarded a gold medal in your bachelor's degree. So, what was the drive? What was your goal? How were you then?
Um, I guess I was a very pretty average kid in school in the sense I had to study part of a middle class family, so wanting to do well in studies and have your career path sorted was pretty much like the goal of me and my brothers as well.
Hmm.
Um, so I think in that sense I was a pretty regular kid. Just wanted to kind of basically figure out a place in life and do well in that sense. um so yeah, that I think I was fairly okay, average in studies, above average. I think school gave us the platform to kind of be involved in other things, extracurricular activities and all of that. So I think for me, class 11, 12 was pretty pivotal, like in that sense, and kind of just got the opportunity to have responsibilities. And in that sense it kind of set that path, and that's when I kind of switched to economics and finance. So I kind of did science and economics in my 11th and 12th, so kind of keeping that engineering option open but really moving more and more towards economics. uh, so I think, yeah, all of that, I think I was an okayish kid.
Hmm.
um, Not spectacular in terms of academic or extracurriculars, or particularly good in a sport or an instrument or anything, but overall decent with all of them.
Hmm. And what about your 10th and 12th grades?
I think so I took my 10th board long time back. It feels so far back now. I think I got, that time there was a thing of best of five, and I think
Yeah.
I got best of 591%, which
Oh.
sounds like ridiculously shit today, but I think it was okay by standards
It is
then.
still okay by standards.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, so my 10th was that, and I think that time it was simply science. I don't remember there was a optional anything.
Okay, okay. So you took economics in 12th, right?
Yeah, I switched from, oh no, yeah, it was science and computer science. So I switched from computer science to economics in 11th. So I sat down for a class in economics in
Hmm.
class 11 only because my friends were going, no other reasons. I was like, okay, let's kind of sit for one.
Okay.
Even though I was officially in computer science, I had
Hmm.
already selected computer science as my stream for 11th and 12th. I went for an economics class and I really liked it because they were teaching demand supply. And
Hmm.
it was just seeing in, the theory made so much sense because we had already experienced it in practice, right? By then,
Hmm.
you knew. So it felt like economics was kind of explaining a lot of things that was just happening around you. Um, so my interest, I kind of like that subject, started liking it more. And then I switched from computer science to economics in 11th.
So nothing about, what will be the future or everybody was going after computer science, I think that time. So that was not in the
Yeah.
hindsight.
So I have two brothers, an elder brother and a cousin, like both are elder actually. They both had studied for engineering and gone through different routes. One actually went through one of the NITs, and the other he did his engineering via the army and then continued in the army. But they were both engineers, so by the time I had seen them prepare for all of this, I was not interested. I was like, "ये नहीं करना है मेरे को." Right, like I was not looking forward to it, even though I knew it was like a good way ahead. I was not as keen. So when I found out about economics, I kind of like wanted to make that happen. And then I spoke to a few seniors in school who had done economics, and they had done fairly good internships. Sure, they had done internships abroad, like they had gone to study in the US after that. But the point being that economics as a field still opened a lot of possibilities, and that was enough to convince my parents that okay, like, do your whatever you are interested in, you do that.
And when did you start preparing for CFA?
So CFA only happens after graduation. So I think I did my CFA while I was I just finished my graduation and joined Goldman Sachs. And that was because they paid, if you cleared your CFA, they paid the money back. So it was like
Goldman Sachs does this.
Actually, a lot of the financial firms do it. Goldman Sachs also does it.
I'm a bit confused here. So you joined Goldman Sachs just after bachelor's,
yes.
And you were continuing with CFA, and they said that just study your CFA and you'll get the money back if you can complete it.
Yeah, so CFA is a course anyways that people usually do it on their own time or while they are working and things like that. It's kind of like designed, the course itself is designed like that.
Okay, correct. And how did you get the opportunity to get into Goldman Sachs?
Campus placement, to be honest. It was actually, to be honest, it was a bit surprising and not in a good way, because I had heard from my friends that Goldman Sachs in the US was a very selective company, investment bank. It was very difficult to get through that. They came to our campus and like took some 15, 16 people, and I was just like, like, what happened to that? But then over time you realize that okay, Goldman Sachs there versus Goldman Sachs here, it's very different. Like the kind of work you do, the kind of environment you're in, the kind of opportunities you have as well.
And what was the opportunity and your role here?
At Goldman Sachs?
Yeah.
Oh, I was one of the many, many graduates part of their operations team. So most of Goldman Sachs is in Bangalore is either engineering or it's operations. And operations essentially is a support function. It's so what I was doing was basically reconciling some ledgers at the global level for transactions that were happening between different Goldman Sachs entities.
Okay.
All of that is to say is that it's very process oriented work, right? Like it's not fun work. It's not even remotely related to the work that Goldman Sachs as a business does.
And as you said in 11th, you chose economics from computer science because of the reality and the things that were going on were relatable. So did you use economics anywhere in this job after your bachelor's?
No, I mean, not, of course not. But like, that's just because the job was only process oriented. But, I mean, like economics principles, a lot of them are applicable in everyday life, including in aspects of your job, right? Like if you understand, let's say, diminishing marginal utility, that is applicable in so many aspects, including job and life.
Right. And is that the reason you left Goldman Sachs within, I think, 7 months?
Yeah, of course. I wanted to leave like within 3 days, but then I couldn't. Like I told them that, so the placement was very random in terms of like, who is assigned to which team and all of that. I told them that, at least I have a good idea of what all I want to do in terms of like, you put me in operations, but put me in operations that's closer to, let's say, trading or investment banking. Not like at some third derivative of the core business. but they didn't, and they were like, you can either continue in this or you can quit. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a few months and then I'll see. But then
Oh.
it was always it came with an expiry. I knew that.
And you joined the show after that.
Yeah.
So you told me that if you complete your CFA, then they'll pay back the amount or the fees of CFA. So is that the same proposal that this company also gave you?
No, so I mean, they give that. So in the case of Goldman Sachs, I crossed my level 1 while I was there, and they reimbursed me for that fee. But then
Oh,
when I quit, I had to pay it back.
oh, okay, okay.
So you don't have to pay it back if you usually stay for 1 year or some. It varies from companies to companies, but I think on average 1 year you have to stay to kind of like keep
Hmm.
it.
Oh,
But yeah, D Shaw had the same thing.
it was the same thing. And
Yeah.
is it a very common thing? Because I don't know about CFA that much, but is it?
I think it's fairly common in asset management firms or
Oh.
firms that is, that if you're working in asset management firms and want to do CFA, the employer reimbursing you if you
Hmm.
successfully clear it, it's fairly common.
Okay. So let's get back. I was actually very interested by that. Let's get back to Disha, and I
Sure.
want to understand your role there now. So from process oriented role to something else maybe now.
Yeah, D Shaw was actually a pretty cool experience. So the role there was half the role there was data cleaning work. So basically, D Shaw is a hedge fund. It's a fairly popular and selective hedge fund with quite a reputation in global markets. So they are one of the pioneers of algorithm trading. So basically writing code which analyzes a bunch of data and comes up with trading strategies, and the it's run by the computer. There's very limited human involvement. So D Shaw is one of those firms which pioneered that. So to run any algorithms, you need a lot of data. So they had a lot of data providers, and our role was to kind of like cross verify that data and ensure that it's accurate. Because what happens, let's say they had a trading strategy based on corporate actions. So corporate actions would be like when a company is giving a rights issue or they are having a share split where one share becomes two shares,
Hmm.
or they're doing a buyback.
Hmm.
um, so these kind of events essentially uh, change the share price. We
Hmm.
change the share price in a very objective mathematical way. But then what actually happens, because there are two aspects to it. One is objectively what should happen based on the math formula, and then what is the sentiment around that people come with and have traditionally historically come with,
Hmm.
right? So they kind of like need a lot of data, and our role was to ensure that data input is correct. Because just imagine if something that is one becomes negative one,
Hmm.
then you, instead of going, let's say, a direction where you are buying something, you might end up going in an opposite direction of selling something and take an incorrect trade. So
Hmm.
they had a team that was kind of like responsible for different strategies, kind of assimilating, verifying, and processing data. And I was part of one of those teams. But it was, even though it was, did that data cleaning work was still interesting because it had a real impact. Like, if you screwed up, you knew that a loss or a profit, something would happen which was not supposed to happen.
Hmm.
Um, but the other half of the work was even more interesting because we were kind of like mapped to particular traders sitting in New York and working, kind of like helping them out with their projects. And
Hmm.
those projects could be various different ones. Like, I worked on like a private equity deal with Alibaba that at that point was going on. Like, not, when I say worked, I mean like we've been involved in the project in either creating some model or doing some analysis or doing some research, not like part of the core team, but still being involved in that project, right? And understanding what is happening. Similarly, like, equities in like South America, wind farms in like eastern coast of the US. So those projects were pretty cool because they were different and diverse, and secondly, you got like first-hand exposure with a trader sitting in New York,
Hmm.
uh, and taking such decisions. and managing a portfolio in that sense.
So, like, you were primarily focused on countries out of India, is it?
Yes,
It was. And can you
the
just...
whole business was. There was very
Okay.
few small aspects of DE Shaw globally that is in India, and you were involved in some of those projects as well. In
Hmm.
fact, DE Shaw at that point was doing a joint venture with Reliance Industries to set up an institutional brokerage in Bombay.
Hmm.
And for a good 4 months, I was part of that team as well.
Hmm.
But ultimately, that business didn't pick up. But for most parts of my time at D Shaw, a lot of my focus was on markets outside India.
Okay. And data cleaning was the role mainly you were part of.
Not cleaning data, but like kind of like just ensuring. Cleaning is probably too basic a word, but yeah,
Okay.
some sort of data cleaning, aggregating, processing. Um,
Got it.
yeah,
So you worked till I think February 2013, and then you
yeah,
started your 1 year master's degree at Oxford in 2014,
that's correct.
right? So during this duration, you worked in business journalism in India's second largest financial daily, that is Business Standard. You also prepared for, I think, Oxford applications during that time because that was the time
Yeah,
left for you. And you also got 5 different scholarships from different organizations, right?
yeah.
So fitting in all those things in that duration, I want to dig way deeper right now into these.
No,
So,
it was simple progression in the sense that I knew that while I was at D Shaw, I would not be able to move to the front end side of things, like
hmm,
doing more meaningful work in terms of like being closer to taking investments related decisions or being part of a team that is managing investments or doing the research involved there. So we kind of knew that while staying at D Shaw in that Hyderabad office, that progression was not going to happen.
hmm,
It could just be more seniority or managerial work, but that entire office only primarily was a research hub where the role was again that of support primarily.
hmm.
Um, so it was became very clear that if I want to do that kind of work in India, I either have to do an MBA from one of the IIMs, or I kind of like move abroad and kind of like do a master's or an MBA there. And I didn't want to take the CAT exam, so I was like, it's I want to then probably it became clear that I need to go abroad, and I didn't want to. I actively decided to not do an MBA because I wanted more specialization in economics related finance, right? As opposed to MBAs are they touch they don't go as deep. They touch relatively shallow, but like they touch many different aspects from finance to marketing to operations, and these kind. That's how MBAs are designed. But I wanted to go deeper in finance, so I kind of like decided to do a master's in economics and finance, and so that's why I quit D Shaw, because I wanted to focus pretty much on that, and I had the luxury where I could just quit and kind of like go back to Calcutta, home, which is home, and kind of like work on my applications and progress like that. So I kind of like worked on my applications, took the GRE.
Just
Uh,
one question, just wanted
yeah,
to get into one point. So, I want to understand the role that you got in D-Shaw versus the role that the front end role. Was it not a management role? Was it something else? Because I want to understand why masters in finance, like what is the role that you were chasing after?
I actually wanted to become more into investment banking at that point in time. That was since school actually, since the first. That's why I was excited about Goldman Sachs, because it's an investment bank.
Hmm.
So I wanted to be an investment banker at that point in time. Also, my dream role would have been Goldman Sachs in London,
Hmm.
uh, in the investment banking team. So at that point in time, that was still what the ideal front end role I would have been chasing.
Okay. And you thought that masters in finance is a better way to go rather than MBA in finance at that point?
I did think that in hindsight, it's probably not the right approach. Like, just because of how a master's versus an MBA was perceived in the UK. So your entry positions as a default are a slightly higher at an associate level if you're coming out of an MBA versus an analyst level if you're coming out for a master's. That's not to say that, if you are qualified, you cannot become an associate there, but it's a lot more difficult because the default is analyst.
Okay, okay.
So, if you're in a position to kind of do an MBA over a master's, then, that is probably a better route to do. But then again, it all depends on why you are doing what you're doing, right? Like why you're pursuing what you're pursuing.
And how did you prepare for your exams and profile building? Was there any specific aspect to it?
Not really. Yeah, I mean, exam is an exam. Like you just prepare for it. Like people have different styles for that. Like so I think I function best when there's less time left.
Okay.
I mean, I think I'm able to extract more out of myself in those situations, and that is what has worked best for me. But like, the whole point of quitting your job was to focus on that. So like, I think I was able to, like, I had more time to kind of like take the GRE and work on my applications. And working on applications, I think sometimes, I don't know how it is today, because for me, all of this was like many years back, 8-9 years back. I would hope that a lot of it has changed since then, because at that point in time, a lot of this was very tedious work. There were professors who you had to sit down with because they didn't really understand computers that well, and ensure that they are clicking on the right things, right? Or like we had to like just I had to go all the way back to Chennai a couple of times just because you need some documents from the college, right? Like, and even then there, it's not like a very seamless process. It's more of like, yeah, come back. But I think all of those things are just some things that you got to do if you got to apply. But I think a lot of the profile building and all, honestly, I believe like if you are at a stage where you haven't done a lot of, if you can only change as much of your life in like 3 to 6 months, right? Like just to apply, make your application stronger. You can maybe improve it, change your application, strengthen it by 5 to 10%, but you can't really go and change 12-13 years of your life, right? Like that you have done. So profile building is just kind of like identifying things that you as an individual are most proud of up until then in your life, and picking and choosing on those and kind of like building your story around that, right? Because it's always much easier to talk about things that have happened to you and you enjoy talking about.
Actually, I spoke about the profile building because I saw your internship in between. So I was thinking, because it is in journalism, in a financial aspect, or
right. So
maybe
actually, that
different.
happened after I got through the colleges. So
Okay.
I quit like in Feb or March 2013, and I got admission letters by September. And I decided, okay, I know now in 2014 July, I'm going to go. I have like a good 8 months ahead of me. What am I going to do? Right. And at that point in time, I really wanted to live in Bombay because I had visited the city and I really liked it. I had like a brother, and like I had a family. I had free rent there, which is important.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, okay, and I had friends there. So I moved to Bombay and I was like, okay, what do I want to do? And I had been involved in journalism, or like, in like editorial, different, whether magazine or like even um, the Times of India had like a school newspaper called Champ or something. And like I would be involved in those kinds of things. So I wanted to see how business journalism actually functions, because what happens in the world of finance is that if a Wall Street Journal or a Economic Times in India publishes something, that becomes like the new standard for based on which now everyone else talks about. So it's important to kind of understand the kind of research and where how these stories originate from and how much work goes into that. So for me, the thinking was to kind of like get an exposure and experience of that. Because I knew, like, while journalism is interesting, it's not something I'll ever do because it's, honestly speaking, it didn't pay as much. So I was very clear that even if I enjoyed that aspects of writing or journalism or investigation, I was never going to have a career there. So I wanted to kind of like do an internship and kind of experience that at that stage.
And you wrote an article on Bitcoins, right?
Yeah.
So it's 2014. I didn't hear about Bitcoins until I think 2-3 years back, maybe. So was it a very common thing then, or a very new
No,
thing?
not really. It was new. It was increasingly becoming popular, and you know you would think the stories change, but they don't. It always becomes increasingly popular as the price fluctuates, and like people see high returns. That time the scale was from $600 to $1,200, and people were like, what, like it's gone from $600 to $1,200 in like just 3 months. Then later on, when it happened and you heard in 2017, the scale was like, oh, it's gone from like $1,000 to like $20,000. And
Yeah.
then later on, like in 2020, when it happened, the scale was again very different, right? It went from 20 to 60 or whatever. But these things happen, like when you see it happening more and more in news media, always assume it's because it's spiked up or gone down a lot. That's it.
And coming to the third thing that you did during that time is getting 5 scholarships from different
Yeah.
organizations. And I have researched a lot on scholarships. I don't know how about you, but I don't find it that easy to get. So I want to understand more that, first of all, how was the total expense at the end of the day for Oxford after these scholarships? And how did you bag these scholarships?
I'm not, so after these scholarships, I think in total, the expense would have come to around 45, 50 lakhs for a year. Definitely 40 plus. Actually, nahi, 40 hoga. Maybe 40. Anyways, the scholarships part of that is honestly simple. Like, I realized that. So I was also shortlisted for the Commonwealth Scholarship. And they distribute that for subject wise. Okay. So I had gone for that interview in Delhi, and that's when I realized the kind of weightage the name Oxford carries. Because I was talking to some people who were there for like geography or something, and very different subjects, right? Like, but they all were like wowed with Oxford. But for London School of Economics, they were just like, theek hai. Like whatever. Some of them didn't even hear of it. But Oxford, kind of like everyone, like I could see their reaction change, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, didn't realize it's that big a deal, because I was equally considering LSE and Oxford, because having been from that subject, you kind of knew that they were both pretty good and both pretty difficult to get into. If anything, LSE had a longer history for that particular course. So the scholarships and all of that happened, I think, for just because of trying, right? Like finding different avenues and just trying, because it's a lot of work. Like, say, I think sometimes I got like, there were four, five different organizations who gave like 2-3 lakhs or 4 lakhs. It's not like huge, but the amount of work you still have to do is the same that you'll have to do if you're applying for like a 20 lakh worth of scholarship. The only good thing is that it's 90% of that it's replicable once you've done it once. It's like make the case, do their own paperwork. They had their own channel. They had their own. A lot of it is very sarkari in their operations. But at the end of the day, it's worth it if you're able to like reduce your loan amount by that much. So yeah, I think the important learning there was that there are multiple avenues for scholarships. Usually it's, people apply when they apply to a university or a college or for a course, you obviously apply to the scholarships that you are eligible for in that particular college or in that particular university, right? But increasingly, there are more and more organizations that aren't affiliated to a particular university, right? They might be foundations backed by charitable trusts of corporate houses, or they might be institution organizations for, let's say, different sections of communities.
Hmm.
um, but the point is that there are more than one avenues that exist, and it, even if it's an interest free loan, like, not a scholarship also, I think it makes sense to tap that.
Hmm. Got it. So moving on now, let's say
Yeah.
you got into Oxford, you did everything, and you're in UK. So I
Okay.
want to know your schedule, maybe in a weekday, how you worked, what happened there the moment you stepped in.
I think when you go there, like, I think it's very difficult to not be blown away by the sheer grandeur of that place. Like, the place oozes like a different feel, because there are buildings that, it's like such a, it's like within a kilometer there'll just be like, 10 buildings, like the fanciest British architecture that you can think of in India, right? Like the GPO in Bombay or Calcutta.
Mhm.
uh, they're just buildings and universities like that around, and it's all very historic, right? You feel that. But it's a great experience to there. I think my daily schedule kind of like varied. I think I was studious the first 1.5 months that I was there. Over time, realized that exams, these are not really going to matter right as much, because uh, it was a 1 year course, right? So your interviews pretty much started within a month, 2 months of you joining it. So
Hmm.
the trade-off becomes, do you want to study more, or do you want to ensure that you kind of like secure your job first, right? And invariably, for most of us who kind of like go there with the hopes of getting a job, that becomes a higher priority.
Hmm.
Or at least for most of us, it did. So my schedule became more of like missing a lot of classes, applying for more of these jobs, still staying on top of like, academics a bit, but not as much, and being involved in a lot of this different activities and groups that the college offers, because that again helps.
Hmm.
It's also fun, but it also helps.
Hmm. And when did you back the job that you were looking for?
I got I didn't get the job I was looking for, actually.
Okay.
Um, uh, I got the job I did get quite towards the end, actually, I think in March. So,
Hmm.
like a month before,
Finish off the course.
yeah, month or 2 months before that.
Okay. And how is the cultural difference there in Oxford?
Not that much, to be honest.
Most are Indians only there. How
No,
many?
no. So Oxford as a place is huge, right? Like, they have graduate students, postgraduate students, doctoral students. So obviously, most of the undergrads is very UK heavy, right? Like, but
Hmm.
masters and PhD DPhil candidates would be a lot more diverse.
Hmm.
In fact, like, I think in our course in the masters in economics and finance, a good 30 out of the 80 students would have been from China. In fact,
Okay. And one more thing. So, what is the difference between economics and financial economics?
financial economics or is the same thing as economics and finance. Okay, it's
Okay.
basically trying to see how economic theories apply in the financial world.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Right after your Oxford, you joined Willis Towers. That's what
Yes.
you got in March, I guess, as a
Yes.
senior analyst here now.
Yeah.
And this was like it was not through placements in your college. It was completely you
They don't
telling.
have the concept of placements in the UK, like, how you do in India, where companies come with the objective of recruiting an X number of people. They don't have that there.
Hmm.
What they do have is companies come, they give a presentation, you kind of network and like make connections, and something can maybe work out if they have openings or if they are hiring. But there is no defined placement that happens.
Okay. So what was your role here and how was it different from Disha now?
The role, so the role was I was part of a team which so Willis Towers Watson as a business was their business they were investment consultants. So what we did was basically advise people who have a lot of money. So like when I say a lot of money, I mean like imagine think of a pension fund, right? So there are, let's say, a company like Unilever. There are thousands of employees there. Each of them save a certain amount each month for their provident fund, right? Similar to how in India. Um, Here it goes to EPFO, but there each corporate has their own pension fund. So that amount becomes like in billions of dollars for large organizations. Now, usually the problem is that people who are trustees of that fund, right? They will be people from that industry. So, like in the case of Unilever, they'll be from FMCG businesses or marketing professionals. Now, they don't have much idea about investments, right? So, they don't know how to handle a portfolio, who to go to for investments, what is it that they should or shouldn't be doing. Um, so, that's why these guys come in and they tell you that, okay, this what is your goal, this is the amount you're getting each month, these are your liabilities in terms of what you have to pay off employees in the future, how will you get to that kind of goal, okay, you need this x%, how can you get there, this is the asset allocation you should be doing. If you're putting, let's say, 20% in equities, then these are the fund managers you should be putting your money with.
Hmm.
So that's what the business does. Now, to select that, we sit between people who have a lot of money and people who invest, who have the expertise to invest that money. So that could be asset management companies, hedge funds, private equity funds, venture capitalist funds, all these different kinds of players. And, within each of them, there are hundreds of different strategies. Okay. So my role was to look at the alternative credit business, speak to various hedge funds that are out there that are in that space of alternative credit, see which are the good strategies that might fit with client needs. Or sometimes if we have clients who are looking for certain strategies, then you kind of go and find managers who are doing work in that space, negotiate with them on like how what the fees would be, ensure that basically do all the due diligence negotiations, and till such time you're involved in the entire process, till such time the money actually goes. Then once it's gone, you kind of like do the reviews, ensure that the strategy is going as per it's going, kind of like get a sense of why things are, let's say, not going how they should. Let's say, if a strategy is supposed to have given 15% but has only given 12%, then you kind of dig deeper into what went wrong, what are the things that they are doing to change that. So that was my role essentially.
Okay. And why did you plan to come back to India from there now?
um that was so it was a the decision was based on two things. In the long run, I anyways knew I had a preference to come back to India. The decision, I think, was accelerated because of the fact that I was increasingly more interested to join the fintech space. Because up until then, I had been involved in more what would be classified as traditional finance, right? Like these are large investment banks or investment consulting businesses that have been around for 100, 150 years, or
Mhm.
if not longer. But I was more and more interested in joining the startup scene, fintech scene that was happening. The challenge was in the UK. It was difficult at that point in time to get visa sponsorship from a lot of these fintechs because they were small. And usually what happens is if the company is not of a certain scale, they don't tend to take on the all the administrative hassle that comes with sponsoring a visa as an
Mhm.
employer. So a lot of them just tend not to do that. So it was more of a question of like, would it be better to go back or stay here? And like, what kind of things would I be able to do here? And then I kind of like ultimately decided to move back.
So was there a financial downgrade because of this decision?
Um, in absolute sense, yes. In relative sense, not as much.
So relative
Uh,
as in living expense and all, standard of living.
like how much can you save in a year,
Hmm.
right? It's not about how much you make.
Hmm.
It's always a question of how much you can save in a year, right? In that aspect, it was not as much of a difference.
Okay.
Absolutely sure, yeah.
Okay. So the fintech you're talking about is Smallcase, right?
Yeah, it's not like I happened to join them immediately.
Hmm.
I just knew I was coming back with this kind of a goal. I took a 3 month break
Okay.
before that, and then you know, and
So
then I ultimately went and discovered Small Case.
how did you discover Smallcase?
So I was actually, I was very interested in the crypto space also at that point in time. So I was applying to both, both fintech as well as, but probably with a more bias towards crypto at that point in time firms. So it so happened I'd applied to this firm, which was Bangalore based, and the guy, ultimately was like, we need a person who has more technical knowledge in terms of coding skills.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't be a good fit, but he was like, if you come to Bangalore, that kind of like, let's catch up, whatever. Then I happened to kind of visit Bangalore with this intention only of kind of like networking and like kind of meeting people. Because I knew Bangalore would be, there's a lot happening in fintech. This is back in 2018, early 2018.
Hmm.
Um, so I kind of like, came here. So I met him. He kind of introduced me to to Karthik Rangappa, who heads Varsity at Zerodha.
Oh.
Uh, and then they put me in touch with the guys who ran Small Case,
Hmm.
and kind of then it took off from there.
I just want to get not related to your story, but something
Sure.
I wanted to add here for our audience. So basically, we have an club Alt Uni, and if you don't know about it, it's mostly about how you can meet these people, network, as you said. You can meet those important CXO interactions. Then you can meet people who you don't even imagine can help you in the future and can help you get a promotion, can help you with more hiked salary, etc., etc., but not selling it out like that. But moreover, want to say that this is how the world works, and I've taken many interviews of many people, and most of them always come up and tell me, okay, I didn't give an exam to get into a company. It was just contacts and networking completely. So I want to put this across to all my viewers that we have a platform like that. So I think it will help you guys. So just check it out and see if it does. So getting back to you, I'm
Yeah.
sorry for this, but I had to put this point across. Very important
Oh,
network.
yeah.
So
Agreed.
yeah, so you were talking about small case. So the thing I know is small case is very interesting to me as a
Right.
user, and I want to know. I want the audience to know more about the company. So I
Okay.
just tell us what small case does and how it works.
Yeah, sure. So, Small Case essentially creates portfolios of stocks or ETFs, right? And these portfolios can follow a certain theme or a strategy.
Hmm.
Um, why would someone like do that? It's for many different reasons. Like it is because a lot of people are interested in equities, but then they don't really have the time or the skills to kind of do that research, right? So for a lot, but they believe a lot of times people have like a view about certain industries or certain themes. um, so this is kind of like giving them a easier, quicker way to kind of take an exposure to that belief that they'll have with that particular theme. Similarly, people are aware of certain strategies that work, right? But again, they may not have the either the knowledge or the time to kind of replicate those strategies on their own. So again, this kind of like gives a ready-made basket, selection of stocks that kind of meet a certain criteria or a investment objective, a thesis. So that's essentially what Smallcase at its core does. It kind of creates these ready-made portfolios that kind of people can invest in one click.
And how is it different from mutual funds?
It's different, it's not different in its concept, because what mutual funds bring mainly to the retail investor is diversification, right? It's again a portfolio of stocks, of whether it could be 20 stocks or 30 stocks, or it could be an index fund which has 50 stocks. But again, the idea is that they bring diversification to the investor. So in that sense, it's not different from a Smallcase. The differences lie more in terms of like, how it's structured. In the case of a mutual fund, you are basically getting a unit in exchange for the money that you give. You get a unit in that trust. You are not a shareholder, right? You are pooling, you are getting a unit that is going to be in proportion to whatever the assets the trust has. And they charge you a fees. Here in the case of Smallcase, you get ownership of the stocks, and the fees are actually lesser because you don't have as many overhead expenses that a mutual fund setup will have. So the differences lie more in terms of execution. And I feel like the evolution has been that mutual funds came around, I think, in the late 19th century or early 20th century. So that's when I think 1920s is when the first mutual fund came about. The next advancement, not in terms of the concept, but in terms of the structure, was an ETF, which came about in the 1990s. Smallcase is similarly, an upgrade or an advancement in terms of just you keep the same concept of diversification, but you would just provide a more flexible and better experience than a mutual fund now.
Okay. And at what stage were you part of this company? Like, when did the company start and when did you join in the company?
I think Smallcase, the platform, started in 2016. The company would have started in 2015. I joined in 2018 when they were still less than 20 people. So
what was your role? What was the achievement in that company?
When I joined, actually, the role was undefined because it wasn't clear the direction the business would go, and hence it wasn't clear how exactly I would fit in. But why this started out was, what was clear is that I understood the product very well, and being an investor myself, I kind of like could relate to almost all the users in some way or the other, as well as understand the product a lot better, right? And the kind of problem that they were trying to solve. So my role then ultimately, like, initially became, when I joined, basically we were in the final stages of integrating with our first broker aside of Zerodha, so integrating with Axis Direct. So I had joined at that stage, and my role very quickly became looking at all aspects that were non-technical and that had to do with the launch, with the integration. So basically strategizing the launch of Smallcases on Axis Direct.
Okay. And throughout, you have been working in some core finance or investment.
You're right.
And now you landed up in a business growth side. So
Right.
out of all the MBA people out there in India or out of India, why do you think you were chosen by Smallcase to become a growth analyst?
I mean, honestly, like MBA people and all of that. So in 2018, the market was still not as big as how it is today, right? A lot of the growth has come in the last year and a half, post, the recovery after COVID, both in terms of the markets as well as in terms of the hiring and the funding and all of that. I'm kind of digressing, but like, I think I think at that point in time, it just happened that, we kind of like met each other, right? Like they weren't exactly looking for someone like me at that point in time because their focus was more on engineering and the product. But when they were in a position when they were looking, it made sense for us to continue that chat again. And it was only because I understood the product and the problem that they were trying to solve very well that that worked out. Like, and I was able to do not just business growth, but a bunch of other things at Smallcase, right? Including, let's say, content or branding projects or being part of marketing campaigns, not because I had expertise of branding or marketing or creating content, but because I understood both the product as well as the mindset of the user, who in this case would be an investor. Right. So it's very difficult to create a marketing campaign for someone if you yourself have not invested 50,000 rupees and have seen that 30,000 go down to 30,000 rupees and see that go up to 60,000 rupees. You cannot come up with that sentiment if you've not experienced it. So it's a lot more. It's a lot more important, or rather beneficial, if you understand that, if you can put yourself and have experienced that, what a user would be going through or would be thinking of if they had to kind of take the decision or the action that you are asking them to take. Thinking from their perspective helps a lot.
No, this makes sense. Now, I just want to understand your leadership role in that company. So, did you have people who were working under you at this
Yeah,
point?
of course.
You had, and what were the skills that you were looking for when you hired people?
So there would be skills that would be, role specific. So at different stages, I was hiring for different roles. So I'll give you two examples. At one point, we were looking to hire a growth executive who would kind of like set up a better feedback system with our users who weren't transacting or who had stopped transacting. So in there, it was important for me to look for two things. One was basically how well they understand the equity markets and like it. That was important because if you like something, then even if you don't know it, you can learn it. If you don't like it, then it's everything becomes a bit of a more tedious task.
Right.
So having that interest in the equity markets was important, and obviously the willingness to learn there in that sense. So that was one, but the other was also like, how do they handle like, conversations where, let's say, if I am not giving you the right answers or I am asking you different difficult questions, and like, how quickly do you get frustrated, or how do you handle that kind of a response? What response do you give? Not give that kind of skills, right? Like basically probably ability to think on feet plus combined with general mannerisms.
That was the skill.
So now that the second part, ability to think on the feet plus general mannerism, is something which is great to have no matter what role you're applying for.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not necessarily just because you had a customer facing role here that's a great skill to have. That's a great skill to have even if you're in sales or if you're in marketing or even as an engineer, because you are somewhat or the other always in a battle that is like that, right? Where you have to convince someone to do or not do something.
Right. So you worked here from 2018 to 2020, right?
Yeah.
And as you said before, also, we know that COVID stuck us, and though there were many cons to it, but stock markets were booming because of that. And so was Smallcase. Many people got to know about it, invested in it, and had money to do that. So why did you choose to leave the company at that point?
So there were two things. Like it became I wanted to kind of like, explore more of a path which I knew Smallcase wouldn't take. So basically, like, the problem I saw and while I was at Smallcase was that people kind of like came out of college unequipped with these things, right? Whereas that shouldn't be the case, in my opinion. College is a time when most people think about the kind of placement they'll have, the kind of salaries they'll make, um, as well as they have the time to kind of like, get a few basics of finance sorted. Um, they have the time to do that. Because what happens after one leaves college is that you get caught up in daily life, you get caught up with work. Most people want to be doing well at work, so work takes a fair amount of time. You now have money a lot more than what you did in college, so you obviously are keen to spend it, so that takes some of the time. And these things are not really very exciting decisions to take, right? Ki, I'm going to think of my insurance, or I want to figure out which SIP to take, and things like these are not exciting decisions to make. So what happens usually is that 3-4 years go by before people actually start taking steps towards their financial journey, whereas it can be sorted from day one, with some amount of guidance and some amount of effort in at the college level itself. um, so that's the problem I was more and more interested in and trying to solve, so which I knew that Smallcase was not going to go to that kind of a user target audience at that stage, or in the near future. So that was one of the major factors, behind that decision. Um, the other was, I found myself basically having making a good trade in 2020, which gave me a lot more financial freedom to kind of take such decisions as well, right? So yeah.
Okay. And so I guess you wanted to try your own business out, right? On this only.
the it was an interesting problem to solve. I again wanted to take like some time off initially and then get to this, which yeah, but yeah,
Okay. So
that was the goal.
Can you just tell me, like, what were the issues that you faced during the execution of your ideas and your goal?
So honestly, it didn't exactly go down like that. So I started working on the idea much later than I had anticipated. One of the main reasons was that, like, after quitting, like, it was an interesting time to be in the market space. So that took a lot more of my time because there were just a lot more opportunities that you could see at that point in time to do, both from an investments as well as from a trading point of view. So it's fair to say that a lot of my focus became that for a good 10 months. I started working on the idea like about a year ago or 10 months ago. Did that for like a few months, but again, stopped working on that. And working on it, see, honestly, it's very easy to have an idea. It's a lot more difficult to kind of like make it happen. And I think it's very important to have the right people around you, or like that 2 or 3 people at the start who you can build something with, because at least I found that, like, a lot better environment. So we struggled because we couldn't consistently create that kind of a setup. People had to, their priorities became different because of COVID, because of situations in their life, uh, or because of just lack of interest also sometimes. Um, so the thing that we faced more about but once we got it going, this thing we struggled with the most was, thinking of how we can productize it, because it's very different to kind of like have it going on as like an offline thing you do. It's a whole different equation if you are, if you can productize it, kind of like create a scalable format of the same business online, right? And that's, I think, was the kind of thing that we struggled with the most in terms of how to do that.
So it is the person you were looking for, a person who can do that or make it happen.
person plus like, that problem at this stage with the current setup I have is not something I can fix or work on. Doesn't make sense.
Just to get a clarity, so during this point, you were trading as well on the backside, right? You're currently also doing it, but actively trading more.
I'm currently not doing it, but yeah, I was
Okay.
then.
Okay. So trading as in you like stock markets, options, futures, all these things? Or
Yeah, that started pretty much in the last 6 months. I wasn't like I wasn't a proponent of that, or like, even I'm still not, to be honest, but I do believe that it can be done. If not consistently, it can be done in pockets, and if you are able to control
Hmm.
urges and emotions and not do it very consistently, it's possible to still come out with good profits and like,
Hmm.
um, do that as an individual person. As a
Right.
business, you can, it's very different, like, it's a different game, but as an individual, if you do it every day, it's very different, I feel.
Hmm. So you have had a lot of changes and tweaks in your career, and you're yet in another crossword, I think, right now. So what is
Yeah.
the next chapter of your life moving on?
I'm not sure. Like, there are 3, 4 different paths that lie ahead. It could, we are yet to see which path this could go down to. I am right now, from a work point of view, I am working. I am kind of interviewing with a couple of firms in the fintech space as well as in the Web3/crypto space.
Okay.
Because and I am a lot more eager to join the Web3/crypto space than, let's say fintech now.
Hmm.
So that's going on one hand. On the other side, like I am working with a friend on an idea, which is in its very early stages, but like, something, if it works out, can happen in the next 1 month.
Hmm.
Um, so that is also going on. And once in a while, I trade and like, check out what's up with the markets. I have investments which sometimes keep me on top, or like things like that. But
Hmm. And
so
do
I'm
you,
not sure exactly what the next path where it will take, but
right,
maybe in a few months we can chat about
we
that.
can sure. So do you have anything offline going on, as in where you give guidance or advices right now?
Informally, not
In,
formally,
oh,
but I think maybe it makes sense because like, it feels like that, like once a week at least I'm chatting with someone who's reached out to me on LinkedIn, so might as well like have something like that going on. But
okay.
it's nice.
So no WhatsApp group as of yet?
Not really, like maybe WhatsApp individual chats.
Okay, I
I do
guess
have
that.
one WhatsApp group where like, I have friends who are basically uh they are not from the investments industry, they are investment noobs, but like I kind of like update all of them when I think like, okay, today is like a good day to put some money types.
I think
Like,
many
because
I, hmm.
these are people who are long-term investors, so they will have their SIPs going on, but there are days when the market's just gone crazy and it's crashed like 3% or 4%. And you feel like those are good days to kind of like, from a long-term point of view, just take advantage of that. So I have a WhatsApp group like that, but not beyond that.
Right, because I think many of our viewers will be interested, to connect with people who can do this and maybe be part of your plan. So I'm just asking if they want to approach you, how to do that.
um they can email me, or LinkedIn works.
Okay,
um
I'll share that with them for sure.
of course, it'll be great,
Hopefully, we
like,
can help you.
anyone, honestly, for they can reach me out, like it's not just if they want to be a part, like in hindsight, I do feel like, especially when taking decisions like going for a master's or which company to join, or what is an industry like or not, like it really helps having people who've been in that space or in that spot to kind of get the experience.
Right. So I guess I'm done with my questions. We'll just take up a few questions. I think we are
Yeah,
running
sure.
a bit late right now, but let's see what our viewers have to say. So first question, was economics an additional subject in your 11th, 12th?
No, I'm not sure of additional, like it was science and economics, so
Right.
three science subjects: English and economics.
Right. The next one is I'm in a similar situation like Vikas with DShaw for almost 6 years. I've cleared CFA level 2 and joining IMT Ghaziabad for PGDM executive program. So do I still have a chance of becoming an investment banker?
You do. I think a more interesting question that you should ask yourself is, do you still want to do that? Because I can tell you one thing is that, it's very different joining as an analyst when you're 22, and it's very different joining as an analyst, let's say, when you're 28, and competing with 22-year-olds. So for you, the question is not investment banking, but if you investment banking, what and what at what level, and whether it's still something that you want to do or not.
Right. I think this is the last question that we have. Can you suggest some small case that we can invest in?
I cannot, not because I can't suggest, but because I know nothing about you. Right? Like whoever's asking this question, it's important, right? Like I can't suggest you something, let's say, make the same suggestion to someone who has 3 dependents and 2 EMIs going, and make the same suggestion to someone who's like say 22 and like 0 dependents and like a lot of disposable income.
So I guess most of our viewers are very young right now. And let's just imagine a person who has no loans, no EMIs going on, and he's a 22-year-old clean slate. So where should
Let me
he?
put it like this. If you haven't started, right, or if you're new to investments and you have all this in you that, I will learn more about this before I take a decision, or, I want to learn more and after that I'll take this decision. Just start off, and I would say start off with an index fund, like put your money in Nifty 50. Or if you want a particular small case, my suggestion would be all-weather investing small case. That's only because these are great places to start. What we tend to do as people, we tend to push off these decisions because we either need more information or need to build more confidence or need to do more research, various reasons. But we lose out a lot by postponing those decisions. So the better thing is to start with these things, and then you will automatically be more involved, and you'll have more skin in the game, and you'll know whether you are interested enough to do research or not. But if not, at least you'll have that going.
Right. I think I said that was the last question. Just we had one more emergency.
Yeah, go for it. No stress.
So why is MSc Finance or MBA Finance better than CFA Charter to enter core finance role?
So I think these are questions from an employment perspective, in the sense that it's how the degrees are looked at, right, by the employer. It's not the inherent value that the degree may or may not add to your knowledge, right, or your experience. It's just a question of the perception that these degrees have in the minds of employers. And in that sense, MBA is the best of all the three, because it just has a better perception in the minds of the employers. CFA is a great add-on to have, but it will never be a degree that will be able to have its own footing compared to an MBA or a master's, I feel personally. And that again is it varies from region to region. The value and the weightage of a CFA is far higher in the US and in the UK or in Europe than it is in India. In India, it's at best a great supplemental degree.
Right.
I
think he got the answer for that. That was really nice. So we are done with today's webinar.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I hope it was helpful, to your viewers, to everyone out there who's tuned in.
Yes, it was definitely helpful. So thank you everyone for joining Inside IM to discuss Vikas Bardia's journey from Goldman Sachs to Oxford to back to India in Smallcase. And now he has 3 options. Let's see. I hope we get all 3 maybe. So all the best for your future, Vikas. And
thank you, Sunandari.
And we wish and appreciate all of you who signed up, and I hope you learned something new from and interesting, and I'll see you in the next webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you, Vikas.
Bye everyone. Have a good evening.